All right, thanks for being here today. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The first thing people notice about my father's house is the staircase. 2 stories, polished oak, wide enough for 3 people to walk side by side. My father likes to say it was designed to make an entrance. Tonight it mostly makes a stage. The house is full, officers, neighbors. A few people my father clearly invited just to remind them he outranks them. Wine glasses clink. Someone laughs too loud near the fireplace. The smell of grilled steak drifts in from the patio. And me, I'm parked in the corner in my electric wheelchair like a decorative plant nobody watered. My name is Samantha Vance. I used to be a field investigator. These days I roll instead of walk, which apparently makes some people forget I still have eyes and ears. Across the room, my sister Jillian is holding court. She's standing beside her husband Derek like they're posing for a magazine nobody asked for. Jillian's dress is tight, expensive, and loud enough to compete with the chandelier. Derek is doing that thing where he casually rests his arm on the bar so everyone can see the watch on his wrist. It's a Rolex, not just a Rolex. The diamond-covered kind that screams, "I make terrible financial decisions." Someone asks about their trip. Jillian lights up immediately. "Oh my God, Dubai was insane," she says. 7-star hotels, rooftop pools, private tours. Derek booked the whole thing last minute. Derek smiles the way people smile when they want applause. "It's nothing," he says. "Just work bonuses. Work bonuses." I glance down at my glass of iced tea so nobody sees my expression, because Derek Rollins is a logistics officer in the Navy. A major. I know exactly what that salary looks like. It doesn't look like $80,000 watches. Across the room, my father Arthur pours wine for 2 guests while pretending not to notice me. That part is familiar. My mother Martha nods politely at every story Jillian tells, like a background character programmed to agree. Family gatherings in this house follow a simple system. Jillian shines, Derek impresses people, my parents host, and I stay out of the way. I roll myself toward the hallway. The bathroom is upstairs, and the electric wheelchair isn't great with tight stair landings, so I switch to my manual chair when I'm inside the house. It's lighter and easier to maneuver. I leave the spare chair at the top of the staircase while I step into the bathroom. 3 minutes, maybe 4. When I come back out, I hear metal crashing, loud, violent. The kind of sound that instantly tells you something expensive just died. I freeze in the hallway. At the bottom of the staircase, my spare wheelchair lies twisted against the wall. One wheel is still spinning. And halfway up the stairs, my sister is standing there with one hand on her hip. Jillian looks down at the wreckage for a second, then looks at me. Her mouth curls into a small smile. "Oops," she says. The guests downstairs fall quiet for a moment. Someone whispers something near the bar. I don't move. Jillian shrugs like she just knocked over a plastic cup. "Well," she says loud enough for everyone to hear, "you only sit in one place anyway. Why would you need 2 chairs? She gestures casually toward the staircase. Trash belongs on the floor. A few people shift uncomfortably. My mother sees the entire thing from the living room. She doesn't say a word. She just refills someone's wine glass. My father glances toward the staircase for half a second, then turns back to his guests and keeps talking about retirement investments. It's almost impressive. A family of 4, and nobody thinks the problem is the woman who just threw a wheelchair down the stairs. I rest my hand on the railing and look down at the mangled frame at the bottom. The metal is bent. One handle snapped clean off. Repairing it will cost money. Replacing it will cost more. But that isn't the thing that makes my chest tighten. What gets my attention is Derek. He's standing beside Jillian now, watching me with mild irritation, like I just interrupted his speech. His wrist moves when he folds his arms. The watch catches the light. Diamond bezel, custom face, presidential bracelet, Rolex Daytona. I've seen that model before. About $80,000, maybe more. I look at Derek. Then I look back at the watch. Then I look at Derek again. Something in my head quietly locks into place, because I spent 8 years investigating financial fraud for the Navy, and I know what a logistics officer earns, even with bonuses, even with deployment pay, even with hazard incentives. It does not add up to that watch, not even close. Jillian is still talking. "You're making that face again," she says. "God, Samantha, you're so dramatic." I don't answer. I just keep looking at Derek's wrist. He notices. His arm drops slightly. That tiny movement tells me more than any spreadsheet ever could. Derek suddenly looks uncomfortable. Interesting. Downstairs, the conversation slowly resumes. People start pretending the staircase incident didn't happen, because pretending is easier. I roll my electric chair a few inches forward and stop at the top step. The broken wheelchair sits at the bottom like a crushed soda can. Jillian folds her arms. "You done staring?" she asks. I finally meet her eyes. For a second, neither of us speaks. Then I say calmly, "You might want to move your luggage out of the hallway." She frowns. What? I nod toward the suitcases beside the wall. "If someone trips, it could get expensive." Jillian laughs. "Oh, please, the only person tripping around here is you." She walks past me, heels clicking on the wood floor, already bored with the moment. Derek follows her downstairs. The Rolex flashes again as he grabs a wine glass. I sit there for a few seconds longer, watching, listening. The party noise slowly fills the house again. Glasses clink, music plays from the speakers. Someone near the patio starts talking about golf, but my attention stays locked on one thing, that watch, because numbers don't lie. And a major in Navy logistics wearing an $80,000 Rolex at a family party usually means one of two things. Either he won the lottery, or he's stealing from someone who can't fight back. I turn my wheelchair toward the hallway and roll quietly toward the guest room. Jillian thinks she just threw my spare wheelchair down the stairs to remind everyone where I belong in this family. What she doesn't realize is that the sound of that metal crashing down those steps might have just ended her husband's entire military career. Before I go any further, I'm curious about something. Have you ever been the smartest person in the room, but everyone treated you like the least important one, just because you didn't fit their idea of success? If that's ever happened to you, tell me in the comments. My father's voice caught up with me halfway down the hallway. "Samantha, a word." I stopped my wheelchair and turned slightly. Arthur Vance walked toward me with the posture he used when he wanted a room to remember he was a colonel. Even in retirement, he moved like he was inspecting troops. Behind him, the party noise continued like nothing had happened. Music, glasses, Derek laughing at something. My father stopped a few feet from me and looked down the hallway toward the staircase. "Was that wheelchair really necessary?" he asked. I looked at him. "You mean the one Jillian threw down the stairs?" His jaw tightened slightly. "That's exactly the kind of drama I'm talking about." "Drama? Interesting word choice." He lowered his voice. "We have guests in this house. Important people, I noticed. You sitting there staring at everyone like you're collecting evidence isn't helping." I almost smiled. Old habits die hard. My father folded his arms. "You're upsetting the atmosphere," he said. "So here's what we're going to do. We." That word always meant the same thing in this house. Everyone agrees with Arthur. "You're going to stay upstairs for the rest of the evening," he continued. "Use the guest bedroom. Order food if you want." He gestured vaguely toward the party downstairs. "And let the adults enjoy the evening." I held his gaze for a moment, then I nodded once. "Sure." He blinked, slightly surprised it was that easy. "Good." My father stepped aside and pointed toward the staircase like he was directing traffic. I rolled past him without another word. The broken wheelchair was still at the bottom of the stairs. One of the guests had moved it against the wall like it was a piece of furniture nobody wanted to talk about. I used the stair lift to reach the second floor and rolled into the guest bedroom. The room was quiet. Neutral walls, a queen bed, a dresser. The kind of space designed to make visitors feel temporary. I closed the door, then I locked it. Downstairs, someone started another round of laughter. My family had officially solved the problem. Step 1, remove the inconvenient daughter. Step 2, pour more wine. I rolled toward the small desk near the window and opened my backpack. Inside was a thin silver laptop. Nothing fancy. If you looked at it in a coffee shop, you'd assume it belonged to a college student writing a term paper. I set it on the desk and opened the lid. The screen lit up. Standard operating system. Clean desktop. I placed my thumb on the biometric reader. The screen went black for half a second. Then the interface changed. A secure login prompt replaced the normal desktop. NCIS Internal Network. Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Most people think investigations start with interrogations and flashing badges. In reality, most of them start exactly like this. A quiet room, a laptop, and someone who noticed something that didn't add up. I logged in. Encrypted channels opened automatically. Data access panels filled the screen. I leaned back slightly and flexed my fingers. Time to check Derek Rollins. I started with the obvious. Logistics Command procurement records. Derek's department handled supply contracts for multiple naval facilities, food, equipment, medical support, and rehabilitation equipment. That last category made me pause. I opened the procurement ledger. Hundreds of entries appeared on the screen, most of them routine: wheelchair replacements, prosthetic limb suppliers, rehabilitation equipment for injured sailors, standard government contracts. But then I noticed something strange. Several payments were marked as processed but not confirmed by delivery records. I opened the first file, $200,000, listed under Naval Rehabilitation Recovery Program. Supplier name Medisys Solutions, delivery status pending. I checked the contract, then the delivery address, then the confirmation code. None of it matched. Interesting. I opened another file. Same supplier, $300,000, pending delivery. I pulled up the vendor registration. Medisys Solutions was registered only 18 months ago. Corporate address, Georgetown, Cayman Islands. I stared at the screen. Then I opened the financial routing logs. Every government transfer leaves a trail, even the ones people try to hide. The data scrolled across the screen. Payment approval signatures, authorization codes, account routing numbers. All of them pointed back to the same approving officer, Major Derek Rollins, my brother-in-law. I opened the account destination. The Cayman account holder appeared on screen. My hand stopped moving on the keyboard, because the name on the shell account wasn't Derek. It was Jillian Vance, my sister. I sat there for a moment reading the numbers. Transfer after transfer. 200,000, 300,000, another 200. All marked under rehabilitation supply contracts. Money that was supposed to buy prosthetic limbs, wheelchairs, physical therapy equipment, things injured sailors needed just to stand up again. Instead, it was going to a Cayman bank account in my sister's name. I leaned back slowly in the chair. Downstairs, the party music drifted faintly through the floor. Someone shouted a toast. The house smelled like expensive wine and grilled steak. Meanwhile, the data on my screen quietly added up the total. $2.4 million. Stolen, not from a corporation, not from some faceless budget, from the Naval Rehabilitation Fund, the program that helps wounded sailors rebuild their lives, the same program that paid for my first wheelchair. For a second, I just stared at the screen, not angry, not shocked, just very, very still. The blue light from the monitor reflected off the desk. My reflection looked calm, but inside my chest something had already decided how this night was going to end. Because I didn't care that my sister had insulted me downstairs. I didn't care that my father locked me in a room like a problem guest. But Derek Rollins stealing from injured sailors, that crossed a line you don't walk back from. I opened a secure command window. My fingers moved across the keyboard. Asset Containment Protocol Request. Department of Defense Financial Task Force Authorization. Case reference suspected procurement fraud. Suspect Major Derek Rollins. Associated financial account Jillian Vance Offshore Holdings. I paused for 1 second. Then I pressed enter. The system processed the request. Authorization approved. Asset freeze initiated. Every connected account tied to Derek's procurement approvals would be locked automatically. Credit lines, investment accounts, bank transfers, all of it. Downstairs, the party was still going. Jillian was probably showing someone pictures from Dubai. Derek was probably explaining how hard he worked to afford that watch. Neither of them knew that somewhere inside the Department of Defense network, a quiet system had just turned their financial lives into a locked vault. I closed the command window. The laptop screen dimmed slightly. My family thought they had locked a disabled woman in a guest room so the evening could continue without embarrassment. They had no idea they had just locked a federal cyber investigator in here with government Wi-Fi and a corruption case worth $2.4 million. And downstairs, the people responsible for it were still pouring themselves another glass of wine. The soft hum of my laptop fan was still fading when someone knocked on the door. Not a polite knock. 3 hard hits against the wood. I closed the financial window on my screen and turned the laptop slightly so it faced away from the door. Then I rolled over and unlocked it. My father stood there. Derek stood behind him. Neither of them looked like they came upstairs to check if I needed dinner. Arthur stepped inside first without asking. Derek followed, closing the door behind him. I noticed the smell of whiskey on Derek immediately. That explained the confidence. My father looked around the room like he was inspecting a barracks. "You've been up here a while," he said. "Peaceful up here." Derek forced a smile. "Hey, Sam," he said. "You doing okay?" That was new. Derek never called me Sam, not once in the 7 years he'd been married to my sister. I rested my hands on the armrests and waited. Because when someone suddenly starts acting friendly, it usually means they want something. Derek walked over to the desk and pulled out the chair. He sat down like we were about to have a business meeting. Arthur stayed standing. That was his favorite position during conversations like this, looking down at people. Derek placed a folder on the desk. Brown legal envelope. He slid a document out and turned it toward me. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said. The paper was a power of attorney form. I didn't touch it. Derek leaned back slightly. "I've got an investment opportunity opening next week," he continued. "Short-term capital move. Very solid return." He tapped the document. "I just need temporary control of some funds to move things quickly." I looked at the form, then I looked at him. "How temporary?" "A few months, 6 at most. And the funds?" Derek smiled again. "That's the thing. You've got that injury compensation settlement sitting in your account, right?" There it was, $150,000. The Navy disability compensation payout from when my spine got rearranged during a field operation 3 years ago. Money that existed because I couldn't walk anymore. Derek spread his hands like he was explaining something simple. "You're not really using it," he said. "Just sitting there." Arthur nodded slowly behind him. Derek continued. "If I move that into this investment cycle, we could double it, maybe triple." His voice carried that confident tone people use when they want you to stop asking questions. "All you have to do is sign the authorization and give me temporary control of the account." I leaned back slightly in my chair. 2 healthy men, standing in a guest bedroom, trying to take the disability settlement of the one person in the house who couldn't walk down the stairs without assistance. I looked at the document again. Then I looked at my father. He was watching me with that familiar expression. The one that meant the conversation wasn't really a conversation. It was an order waiting to be accepted. Arthur spoke. "You live in this house," he said calmly, "for now. You don't pay rent. That's true. You don't pay utilities." I nodded. "Also true." He stepped closer. "That money is just sitting in a bank account while your brother-in-law is working his tail off providing for this family." I almost laughed. Providing. Interesting choice of word for a man who just stole $2.4 million from injured sailors. Arthur pointed at the document. "Sign it, not a request, an instruction." I looked at Derek. He was watching me carefully now. No more friendly smile, just calculation. I placed my hands on the desk, then I shook my head. No, the room went quiet for about 2 seconds. Derek blinked. Arthur frowned slightly. "I'm sorry," Derek said slowly. What I said no, Derek leaned forward. "You didn't even think about it." I did. And the answer is still no." Arthur exhaled through his nose. "You're being selfish." That word again. I tilted my head slightly. Selfish. Derek tapped the paper with his finger. "This helps the whole family." "You mean it helps your investment?" Arthur's voice hardened. "You sit in this house all day." Interesting. I had been in the room for exactly 2 hours. "You eat our food." My father stepped closer. "You contribute nothing." I looked up at him. "Nothing." He ignored the question. "You should be grateful your sister and her husband are willing to include you in opportunities like this." Opportunities. That was one way to describe money laundering. Arthur pointed again at the document. "Sign it." I folded my hands together. No, Derek's patience snapped. His hand slammed down on the desk. The sound made the laptop rattle slightly. "I told you," he snapped, turning to Arthur. "I told you she'd do this." He jabbed a finger toward me. "She's always been like this. Selfish." Arthur stared at me for a long moment, the kind of stare he used when soldiers didn't follow orders. Then he nodded once. "Decision made. Fine." He turned toward the door. Derek stood up and grabbed the document off the desk. Arthur stepped into the hallway. Then he did something interesting. He pulled the door closed. From the outside. And I heard the metal click of the hallway latch sliding into place. A manual lock. Installed years ago when the room was used as a storage space. Arthur's voice came through the door. "You'll stay in there." Derek laughed quietly. Arthur continued. "Until you remember what it means to sacrifice for your family." Footsteps moved away down the hallway. Then the staircase creaked as they went downstairs. I sat there for a moment in the quiet. Then I rolled toward the door and tested the handle. Locked. Not surprising. What was surprising was how helpful that decision might become later. Because there's a very specific legal term for locking someone in a room against their will. Unlawful confinement. And when it happens during an active federal investigation, it becomes evidence. I rolled back to the desk and reopened my laptop. The secure NCIS network window was still active. Financial containment protocol was already running. Account freezes were propagating through the banking network. Downstairs, I could hear the party picking back up again. Someone turned the music louder. Derek was probably explaining away his missing investment funds already. My father believed he had just used discipline to put his problem child in her place. But what he actually did was much more interesting. Because locking me in this room didn't make me powerless. It made him part of the case. My father thought he had just enforced order in his house. He had no idea he had just turned himself into an accessory to a federal crime. The latch outside my door clicked again about an hour later. Not opening. Just someone walking past in the hallway. Voices drifted up through the floor. The party downstairs had reached the loud stage. That's the phase where people start telling the same stories again, because the wine has replaced their short-term memory. I rolled closer to the door and listened for a moment. Jillian's voice cut through the noise, sharp, loud, excited. She was doing that performance tone she uses when she knows people are watching, which meant one thing. Her phone camera was probably out. I rolled back to the desk and checked my laptop. The asset containment process was moving exactly as expected. Every financial account connected to Derek's procurement approvals had already been flagged. Checking accounts, investment accounts, credit cards, government contract payment channels, frozen. The system log showed the timestamp. 17 minutes ago. Perfect. Downstairs, Jillian's voice got louder. Guys, wait, Derek's about to open the Bordeaux. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Of course he was. Derek liked big entrances. I could almost picture the scene. The portable wine distributor he hired had set up a small tasting station near the bar. Fancy bottles lined up like soldiers waiting for inspection. Jillian was probably holding her phone up for social media. Because nothing says elegance like live streaming alcohol purchases. I closed the laptop halfway and rolled closer to the door again. The music downstairs faded for a moment. Someone clapped. Derek spoke loudly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this one's from a private vineyard outside Bordeaux. A guest whistled. Another voice said, That bottle alone is probably $1,000. Derek laughed. Worth every penny. I heard the small beep of a card reader. The wine supplier must have brought a portable POS terminal. Derek liked paying for things in front of people. Public spending was his favorite personality trait. There was a pause. Then another beep. Then silence. Jillian laughed awkwardly. Wait, what happened? The card reader beeped again. Longer this time. I heard the supplier's voice. Sir, it says the transaction failed. Derek sounded annoyed. Try again, another beep. Then a different tone, the kind machines make when they're rejecting something very expensive. The supplier spoke again. It's showing an account restriction. Derek's voice dropped slightly. That's impossible. Another beep. Then Jillian's voice again. Maybe it's the connection. We're live streaming, the Wi-Fi might be slow. Someone chuckled. The supplier spoke carefully. No, ma'am, it's not the network. The terminal says the card has been frozen. Frozen. I could almost hear the exact moment Derek's stomach dropped. Let me see that, he said quickly. There was shuffling, then silence. Then Derek's voice again. Quieter now. Try this one. A second card. Another beep. Then the same error tone. I leaned back in my chair. Right on schedule. Downstairs, the atmosphere changed. You could hear it in the way people stopped talking. The supplier cleared his throat. Sir, this one is showing the same restriction. Jillian's tone lost its cheerful edge. Derek? He didn't answer right away. Then I heard footsteps moving quickly across the floor. A chair scraped. Derek was stepping away from the crowd, probably pulling out his phone. The house went quiet enough that I could hear his voice clearly. He was calling the bank. The call connected after a few rings. Derek forced a polite tone. Hi, this is Major Derek Rollins. I'm having trouble with my account. Pause. Yes, I'm using the correct card. Another pause. Then his voice tightened. What do you mean? Restricted silence stretched for several seconds. The person on the other end was clearly explaining something. Then Derek said, "That doesn't make sense. There must be some mistake." Another long pause. When he spoke again, his voice sounded different. Tight, controlled. "What agency?" The answer came through the phone speaker faintly, but I caught enough of it. "Department of Defense Financial Task Force. Account freeze, initiated 15 minutes ago." Derek didn't speak for a moment. Then he whispered something that didn't sound very professional. Jillian's heels clicked closer. "What did they say?" Derek didn't answer immediately. Finally he spoke. "They froze everything." "What, every account?" Jillian laughed nervously. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." I heard Derek's breathing change. Fast, unsteady. "What do you mean frozen?" Jillian demanded. "The bank says it's a Department of Defense order." Silence filled the house. Even the music had stopped. Jillian lowered her voice. "But why?" Derek didn't answer. Because he already knew. If the Department of Defense froze your accounts, it meant someone inside the system had triggered an investigation. And there weren't many people who could do that. A guest spoke carefully from across the room. "Is everything all right?" Jillian snapped back into performance mode instantly. Yeah, just a bank error." Her voice was forced. Derek wasn't performing anymore. He was thinking, running through possibilities. Then Jillian said something that almost made me laugh. "This is Samantha's fault." Derek sounded confused. "What, she probably called someone at that disability office." Jillian's voice was getting louder now. "You know how she is, always reporting things, always playing victim." "Interesting theory." Derek didn't sound convinced. "She wouldn't have access to—" "She's been acting weird all night," Jillian cut in. "And she was staring at your watch earlier." Derek didn't answer. But the silence told me something important. The idea had landed. Jillian continued. "She probably told someone you were making too much money or something." Derek finally spoke. "That doesn't freeze federal accounts, but it could trigger a review." Another pause. Then Derek exhaled slowly. "Where is she?" "In the guest room," Jillian said. Derek's voice hardened. "She still has that compensation money, right?" "Yes." "Good." Jillian sounded confused. "What does that have to do with—" "We need liquid cash." Jillian went quiet. Derek continued. "If something is happening with my accounts, we need assets moved before Monday." Jillian's voice dropped to a whisper. "You think they're investigating you? I think we need that money." Another pause. Then Jillian said the quiet part out loud. "So we make her sign." Derek didn't argue. Footsteps started moving toward the staircase. Fast, urgent, heels and dress shoes hitting wood. I rolled away from the door and positioned my wheelchair near the center of the room, because panic makes people predictable, and desperate people make mistakes. The hallway floor creaked as they reached the second floor. Their footsteps were fast now, unsteady. Jillian grabbed the hallway latch. The metal rattled. Derek was breathing hard beside her. They were coming up here with the energy of people who believed they were about to take something back. Jillian and Derek stormed up the stairs like animals backed into a corner. They thought they were coming to collect a debt. They had no idea they were about to walk straight into a minefield. The door burst open so hard it slammed against the wall. Jillian stormed in first. Derek followed right behind her. Neither of them bothered closing the door this time. Jillian's hair was slightly out of place now. Her makeup still looked perfect, but the calm confidence she wore downstairs had disappeared. She looked like someone whose house just caught fire. Her eyes locked onto me immediately. "There you are," she snapped. I didn't move. Derek shut the door behind them and stepped closer, breathing hard. The party noise downstairs was still going, but it sounded different now. Tense, curious. People knew something had happened. Jillian pointed at me. "What did you do?" I tilted my head slightly. "Good evening to you too." Her voice jumped an octave. "Don't play dumb with me." She stepped forward and grabbed the handle of my wheelchair. Hard. "What did you do to our accounts?" There it was, straight to the point. I looked at her hand gripping the chair. "I didn't touch your accounts. Bull." She stopped herself and leaned closer. "You called someone, didn't you?" Derek spoke behind her. "Just fix it." His voice was calmer than Jillian's, but it carried a different kind of tension. Controlled panic. "You know someone in the system," he continued. "Call them back." I looked at him. "I'm not sure you understand how federal investigations work." Jillian yanked the wheelchair backward suddenly. The wheels scraped across the wooden floor. "You think this is funny?" The chair rolled toward the hallway. Fast. My shoulders bumped against the doorframe as she dragged me out. The rubber wheels squealed against the polished floorboards. Derek followed close behind us. "Jillian, no," she snapped. "She did this." The hallway lights reflected off the floor as she pulled the chair toward the staircase. The same staircase where my spare wheelchair had crashed earlier that night. We stopped right at the edge of the top step. The broken chair was still visible at the bottom. Twisted metal, one bent wheel. A quiet reminder of how the evening started. Jillian shoved the wheelchair forward another inch. The front wheels hung just short of the first step. "What did you do?" she demanded again. I looked down at the staircase, then back at her. "You're making a scene. I will throw you down these stairs." Her voice was no longer theatrical. It was sharp, real. Derek stepped closer. "Jillian, calm down. You calm down," she snapped. Then she leaned down closer to my face. "You froze our accounts." "No." "You reported something." "No." Her eyes narrowed. "You're lying." I rested my hands lightly on the armrests. "Your financial problems are not my responsibility." She shoved the wheelchair again. The front wheels rolled closer to the edge. The wood creaked under the weight. "Call whoever you called," she said through clenched teeth. "I didn't call anyone. Fix it." I pressed a small button on the armrest. Click. The electronic brake locked the wheels. The chair stopped instantly. Jillian tried to shove it again. Nothing moved. Her eyes flicked down to the controls, then back up to me. "You think this helps you?" I met her stare. "I think you should move your hands." She laughed once. A short, ugly sound. "You're still acting like you're in charge." Her hand slid up from the wheelchair handles and landed flat against my chest. Derek noticed immediately. "Jillian, stay out of it." She leaned closer until her face was inches from mine. "You want to roll down there like your other chair?" Her breath smelled like wine. "You think anyone downstairs will care?" The hallway was silent except for the distant party noise below. I didn't answer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I just looked at her. That seemed to irritate her even more. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. Behind her, Derek shifted uncomfortably. "This is getting stupid." "Then tell her to fix it." Jillian's hands pressed harder against my chest. Her arms tensed. I knew exactly what that posture meant. She was about to push, and when she started, gravity would do the rest. The staircase was steep. Polished wood, a wheelchair hitting those steps wouldn't stop until the bottom. Derek stepped forward again. "Jillian, shut up." She glared at me. "Last chance." I raised my left hand slowly, not to stop her, not to push her away, just enough to reach the smartwatch on my wrist. The device looked ordinary, black band, small screen, but the software inside it wasn't. I placed my thumb on the edge of the watch, then I pressed down. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The screen vibrated once, a silent confirmation. Red level SOS transmitted. The signal went through a secure channel that bypassed normal civilian networks. Straight to a military emergency response node. Location ping included. Threat classification attached. I lowered my hand again. Jillian didn't notice. She was too busy glaring at me. "You really think you're untouchable, don't you?" I looked at her calmly. "I think you're making a very bad decision." Her face twisted. "Oh, please," she leaned closer. "You've always been pathetic." Her hands pushed harder against my chest. The wheelchair didn't move. The brakes held firm, but her intention was clear now. Derek looked from her to me, then toward the staircase. For the first time, I saw doubt in his expression. "Jillian," he said quietly, "what I think we should—" The distant sound of tires screeching outside cut him off. Loud, sharp, multiple vehicles. Jillian frowned. What was that? I looked past her toward the hallway window. Headlights flashed across the walls, several sets, moving fast. Jillian didn't notice yet. She was still focused on me. "You better start talking," she said. I met her eyes. Calm, cold. "You should probably move away from the stairs." Her eyebrows pulled together. Why I didn't answer. Because explaining it wouldn't change what was already happening. Jillian thought pushing a disabled woman down the stairs would prove she had absolute power in this house. What she didn't realize was that the signal I had just sent turned this entire property into an active military extraction site. The sound of tires screeching outside reached the hallway a few seconds later. Not one car, several, fast, hard braking. Jillian frowned and glanced toward the window behind me. "What the hell is that?" Derek stepped toward the railing and looked down the staircase toward the front entrance. The guests downstairs were starting to notice it too. The party noise dropped from cheerful to confused in less than 3 seconds. Someone near the living room said, "Did someone crash outside?" Another voice said. That sounded like 3 vehicles. I could hear doors opening outside, heavy ones. Not the light slam of a sedan door, the thick metal sound of armored SUV doors. Jillian still had her hands on my chest. She hadn't pushed yet, mostly because she was distracted. Derek leaned farther over the railing, his face changed. "What is that?" Jillian snapped at him. What he didn't answer immediately, because at that exact moment the front door downstairs exploded. Not opened. Exploded. The thick oak door my father loved to brag about flew off its hinges with a violent crack that echoed through the entire house. Someone downstairs screamed. Another guest shouted something that sounded like police, but it wasn't police. Boots hit the marble entryway floor, fast, disciplined, multiple sets. Then voices, short commands, military tone, clear left, clear right, move. Jillian froze. What the 2 sets of footsteps broke away from the entry team and headed straight for the staircase, fast enough that I could hear the gear on their vests shifting as they ran. Arthur appeared at the bottom of the stairs. My father looked furious. He stepped forward, pointing toward the door. "Who the hell?" The first soldier reached the base of the staircase. Kevlar helmet, tactical vest, rifle across his chest, Navy Corpsmen insignia on the shoulder patch. He didn't even slow down. Arthur raised his voice. "This is private property. I am Colonel Arthur." The soldier ran past him without making eye contact. The second one followed immediately behind him. Both of them moved up the staircase 2 steps at a time. Arthur turned stunned. "Hey, I'm talking to you." They didn't respond. Their attention was already locked on the top of the stairs, on me, on the wheelchair, on Jillian standing between us and the staircase landing. Derek stepped backward automatically. Military training does that to people. You recognize real authority when you see it. Jillian didn't move. "What is happening?" she demanded. The first corpsman reached the top step. His eyes scanned the hallway once, then locked onto the situation instantly. Disabled officer, aggressive civilian, edge of staircase. He moved before Jillian could react. His left arm shot forward and shoved her sideways, hard. Jillian stumbled and slammed into the hallway wall with a surprised cry. "What the hell?" The second corpsman stepped in front of my wheelchair, immediately positioning himself between me and the staircase. Both men moved with the calm speed of people who had done this many times before. Derek froze halfway up the landing. Arthur stormed up behind him. "This is outrageous," my father barked. "You cannot just—" Neither corpsman looked at him. Their entire focus was on me. The first soldier dropped to one knee in front of the wheelchair. His rifle stayed slung across his chest. His posture was precise, professional. His voice came out steady and formal. "Director Vance," Jillian blinked. "What?" The corpsman continued. "Extraction team has arrived." His eyes quickly scanned me for injuries. "Are you safe, ma'am?" For a moment nobody spoke. Not Derek, not Jillian, not my father. The hallway went completely silent except for the distant murmuring of confused party guests downstairs. Jillian pushed herself off the wall. "Director." Her voice cracked slightly. She looked at me, then at the 2 armed corpsmen, then back at me again. "What is he talking about?" I looked at the soldier kneeling in front of me. "I'm fine." He nodded once, then spoke into the radio on his shoulder. "Package confirmed safe." A voice answered through the earpiece. "Copy." Behind him, the second corpsman remained standing between me and the staircase. Arthur finally reached the top of the stairs. His face was bright red. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. "This is my house," neither soldier reacted. Arthur pointed at me. "What is she telling you people?" The kneeling corpsman stood up slowly. His expression stayed neutral. Then he stepped slightly aside so the hallway opened toward the staircase again. Downstairs, more boots were moving through the house. Agents, military investigators, quiet, efficient. Guests were being directed toward the living room. Someone tried to ask questions. The answer they received was simple. "Please remain seated." Jillian looked like she had just been dropped into the wrong movie. She pointed at me with a shaking hand. "What did you do?" I didn't answer, because the answer was already walking up the staircase. Heavy boots, measured steps, command presence. A senior officer appeared at the bottom of the stairs. 2-star rank pinned to his uniform collar. He walked past Arthur without acknowledging him. My father turned toward him. "General, I demand an explanation." The officer didn't stop. He climbed the stairs slowly and reached the landing. Then he looked directly at me. The hallway suddenly felt very small. The general came to attention. Then he saluted. "Clean, sharp, ma'am." Jillian made a choking sound. Arthur looked completely lost now. The general lowered his hand. "Your extraction request was received 3 minutes ago." He glanced briefly toward the corpsman. "Per your standing security authorization." Then he looked back at me. "The site is secure." Behind him, federal investigators were already moving through the house. One of them walked past Derek and handed something to another agent. "Evidence bags." Arthur stared at me like he had never seen me before. Jillian's mouth hung open. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "What is going on?" The corpsman beside me adjusted his stance slightly, waiting, ready, for instructions. Because the woman Jillian thought she could push down the stairs was not just her disabled sister. And everyone in that hallway was starting to realize it at the same time. The corpsman beside me rested one hand lightly on the handle of my wheelchair. "Ma'am, we're moving you downstairs." I nodded once. The second corpsman stepped into position on the other side of the chair. They didn't rush. They didn't hesitate either. The movement was controlled and precise the way trained medics move patients in combat zones. One lifted the front frame. The other secured the rear. Together they raised the entire wheelchair smoothly off the floor. The chair never tilted. Not even a little. I had been carried out of helicopters less carefully than that. Jillian stared at the scene like she had just forgotten how gravity worked. "You can't be serious," she said. Nobody answered her. The two corpsmen turned and started down the staircase, step by step, steady. Behind us, Derek stood frozen on the landing. My father finally found his voice again. "This is unacceptable," Arthur barked. He followed down the stairs behind us. "This is my house. You cannot just invade a private residence." The corpsmen continued walking like they didn't hear him. Below us, the living room had transformed. The party was over. Every guest was seated on couches or chairs. 2 NCIS agents stood near the doorway keeping watch. Another agent was collecting phones into evidence bags. The portable wine station sat abandoned near the bar. Several bottles of Bordeaux still stood unopened. Jillian's live stream phone was sitting face down on the counter. Someone must have shut it off. When the corpsman carried me into the living room, every guest turned to look. Most of them looked confused. A few looked nervous. One man near the fireplace whispered, "What is happening here?" An agent near the door answered calmly, "Please remain seated." The corpsman reached the front door, or what used to be the front door. The broken oak slab still lay half inside the entryway, where it had been kicked off its hinges. Outside, the night air smelled like hot asphalt and engine exhaust. They carried me through the doorway, and the entire scene outside came into view. Black SUVs filled the driveway, at least 6 of them, engines running, doors open. Red and blue tactical lights rotated slowly on top of one vehicle, painting the front of the house with flashes of color. Dozens of people moved across the yard. NCIS agents, military investigators, evidence technicians. The entire property had been turned into a secured investigation site. The corpsman lowered my wheelchair gently onto the driveway. The tires touched the ground with a soft thump. I rolled forward slightly and stopped. Behind me, Derek stepped outside. His face looked gray now. Jillian followed, clutching the railing like she needed help remembering how stairs worked. Arthur marched past both of them and stepped into the driveway. He looked around at the agents, at the vehicles, at the lights. Then he straightened his shoulders and tried to put the colonel back on. "You are all trespassing on federal property," he announced loudly. Several agents glanced at him. None of them reacted. Arthur stepped toward the nearest SUV. "I am Colonel Arthur Vance." He pointed toward the house. "This is my residence. I demand to know who authorized this operation." One of the agents kept walking past him carrying a sealed evidence case. Another agent spoke quietly into a radio. Arthur's voice got louder. "Did you hear me?" The rear door of the command SUV opened. A tall officer stepped out. 2-star rank, same general who had climbed the staircase earlier. Arthur spotted the insignia immediately. His posture changed instantly. Every military officer recognizes rank that high. Arthur stepped forward quickly. General, he said, relief creeping into his voice. Thank God, I assume there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. The general walked past him without stopping. Not even a glance. Arthur froze mid-sentence. The general continued walking across the driveway, straight toward me. He stopped a few feet in front of my wheelchair. Then he came to attention, sharp, formal. His boots clicked together. He raised his hand in a precise salute. Director Vance. The entire driveway seemed to go silent. The agents nearby paused their movements. Even the flashing lights from the SUVs seemed slower for a moment. The general lowered his salute. The declassification order has been signed. He held a sealed envelope in his hand. Your operational authority has been restored. He extended the envelope toward me. Inside were the documents. Federal arrest warrants, signed earlier that evening, approved by the Department of Defense, and now legally executable. I took the envelope and opened it. The paper inside felt heavier than it should have, probably because of what it meant. Behind me, Jillian's voice trembled. Director, she looked at Derek, then at the agents, then back at me. What does that mean? Derek didn't answer. He was staring at the documents in my hand like they were a loaded weapon. Arthur looked completely stunned. You're giving her orders, he asked the general. The general didn't turn around. He was still looking directly at me, waiting. Because the authority in this operation did not belong to him. It belonged to the person holding the arrest warrants. My father's entire life revolved around rank, uniforms, salutes, chains of command. And tonight he had to stand there and watch a two-star general waiting quietly for instructions from the daughter he used to introduce to guests as his unfortunate situation. I folded the papers once and held them in my lap. The night air was cool, the lights from the vehicles painted the driveway red and blue, and somewhere behind us a group of party guests sat inside the living room realizing they had accidentally attended the wrong kind of event. My father always believed authority flowed from the top down, but tonight he was watching something he never imagined possible. The general he once bragged about meeting at a retirement banquet was now standing in front of me, waiting for my next order. The rotating red lights from the SUVs painted the driveway in slow pulses, red, then darkness, then red again. I sat in the middle of it all in my wheelchair, while the wind moved lightly across the yard. Around me, agents continued working, radios crackled. Evidence bags were passed from one person to another. Someone photographed the front door lying on the ground. Another team member carried a portable case toward the command vehicle. Everything moved with quiet efficiency. No shouting, no confusion, just people doing their jobs. Behind me, Derek finally spoke. His voice sounded thin now. Samantha, I turned my chair slightly toward him. For the first time that night, I spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Major Derek Rollins. My voice carried across the driveway. Not emotional, not loud, just clear. Several agents paused what they were doing. The general stood beside me with his hands behind his back. Derek's shoulders stiffened. You are under arrest, I said calmly. He blinked. For the theft of $2.4 million from the Naval Rehabilitation Recovery Fund. The words landed like bricks. A few of the party guests watching from inside the living room gasped. Derek shook his head immediately. That's ridiculous, I continued. You are also being charged with federal procurement fraud and misuse of military supply contracts. 2 NCIS agents stepped forward. Metal cuffs were already in one of their hands. Derek backed up one step. You can't be serious. I looked at him. Your financial records were flagged 3 hours ago. The agents moved closer. You authorized the transfer of rehabilitation equipment funds to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Derek's face lost what little color it had left. That's not the account holder, I continued, is Jillian Vance. Jillian let out a sharp sound behind him. What? I turned my chair slightly toward her. Jillian Vance. She stared at me like the ground had disappeared. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud and for the attempted assault of a federal officer. The driveway went silent again. An agent stepped behind Derek and grabbed his wrists. The metal cuffs snapped closed. The sound echoed across the yard. Derek reacted instantly. No, wait. He twisted his shoulders. This is a misunderstanding. The agent didn't respond. He simply tightened the cuffs. Derek's knees buckled slightly. I didn't steal anything. Another agent took hold of his arm. You diverted funds meant for injured sailors. Derek shook his head desperately. That's not how it works. Then his legs gave out completely. He dropped to his knees on the wet driveway. The sound of his breath broke into uneven gasps. I didn't know, he said weakly. Nobody answered him. Behind him, Jillian's voice exploded. This is insane! 2 agents stepped toward her. She backed away immediately. You can't arrest me. Her heels slipped slightly on the driveway. Her expensive dress twisted around her legs. This is her fault, she screamed, pointing at me. She's lying. The agents didn't argue. One of them took her wrist. She tried to pull away. Don't touch me. The second agent stepped behind her and secured her other arm. The cuffs closed. Cold. Final. Jillian's voice broke into hysterical shouting. Mom, Dad, Arthur finally moved. He stepped forward quickly. This is outrageous, he shouted. You will release my daughter immediately. 2 agents intercepted him before he could reach Jillian. Arthur tried to push past them. Stand down, he barked. One of the agents spoke calmly. Sir, you need to step back. Arthur looked ready to swing at someone. But then another voice broke through the chaos. Samantha. My mother ran out of the house. Her heels hit the driveway unevenly as she hurried forward. Her eyes were already wet. Samantha. Please, she reached the agents and tried to move around them. Let me talk to her. One of the agents stepped aside slightly. My mother stopped a few feet in front of my wheelchair. Her hands trembled. Samantha, she said softly. You have power now. Her voice cracked. Please, she's your sister. Jillian was still yelling behind her. The cuffs rattled as she struggled. Mom, tell her to stop. My mother looked back at me. Blood is blood, she whispered. Family makes mistakes. I reached slowly into the inside pocket of my jacket. Arthur watched the movement carefully. So did Derek. So did Jillian. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. The power of attorney document Derek brought upstairs earlier. The same one they tried to force me to sign. I held it for a moment. Then I tossed it forward. The paper landed in a shallow puddle near my father's boots. Water spread across the ink instantly. Arthur looked down at it, then back at me. I met his eyes. Family doesn't steal prosthetic legs from wounded sailors. My mother flinched. And family doesn't lock someone in a room when they refuse to be robbed. The wind moved lightly across the driveway again. Jillian's screaming had turned into ragged crying now. Derek sat on the ground with his head lowered, hands cuffed behind his back. My father stood completely still. The paper at his feet slowly soaked through. The signature line stared up at him. Empty. For the first time that night, nobody had anything left to say. The driveway stayed quiet for several seconds after the cuffs clicked shut. Nobody celebrated. Nobody clapped. Federal arrests rarely look dramatic once the noise fades. They usually end like this. Silence, agents moving calmly, and people realizing their lives just changed. Inside the house, the party guests had slowly gathered near the doorway and windows. They were watching everything. The same people who had been laughing with my father an hour earlier were now standing shoulder to shoulder, whispering behind their hands. One woman stepped backward when Derek was pulled to his feet. Another man turned away like he didn't want to be seen near him. The atmosphere shifted quickly. Reputation spreads fast in military circles, but scandal spreads faster. 2 agents lifted Derek up from the wet driveway. His knees were shaky. His expensive jacket was stained with water and dirt. He looked smaller now, much smaller than the man who had been bragging about Bordeaux wine earlier that evening. Please, Derek muttered. Nobody answered. They guided him toward one of the armored SUVs. Jillian was still crying loudly behind him. You can't do this. Her makeup had started to smear down her face. The elegant dress she wore earlier now looked twisted and wrinkled. One of her heels had snapped during the struggle. She limped slightly as the agents walked her forward. Mom, she shouted again. My mother stood frozen near the steps. She looked like someone who had just watched a house collapse. Arthur hadn't moved, not once. He stood near the center of the driveway, staring at the ground. The wet power of attorney document still lay near his boots. The ink had started to blur. One of the agents opened the rear door of the SUV. Derek hesitated for a moment. Then the agent gently pushed him forward. He climbed inside. The door shut with a heavy metal thud. Jillian screamed when they guided her toward the second vehicle. You can't arrest me, I didn't do anything. The agents didn't argue. They helped her into the seat. The door closed. The sound echoed across the driveway. 2 lives just sealed inside federal custody. The guests watching from inside the house slowly backed away from the windows. One man near the door shook his head. Another whispered something to his wife. People moved away from the living room like the entire house had become contaminated. No one wanted to be associated with the scene anymore. A few minutes earlier, they had been drinking wine here. Now they were quietly collecting their coats. Arthur finally spoke. His voice sounded old. "You've destroyed this family." He didn't look at me at first. He looked at the ground. Then he lifted his head slowly. His shoulders were shaking. "You've destroyed everything." The words came out hoarse. For the first time in my life, my father looked small. Not angry, not commanding, just empty. I adjusted the collar of my jacket. The night air had gotten colder. I didn't destroy anything, I said. Arthur stared at me. "You brought the military to my house. Yes. You had your own sister arrested. Yes. You humiliated this family in front of everyone." I looked toward the open front door. Inside, the guests were quietly leaving the living room. They avoided looking outside as they walked past the broken door. Nobody wanted to make eye contact. Arthur followed my gaze. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Everything I built is gone." His entire identity had been built on one thing: respect, rank, reputation, and tonight it had collapsed in less than 15 minutes. I rolled my wheelchair forward slightly. The tires moved quietly over the driveway. "You think I destroyed your reputation," I said calmly. Arthur didn't answer. "You did that yourself." His eyes hardened. "They're criminals," I continued. "They stole money meant for wounded sailors." Arthur opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, because there wasn't a defense for that. My mother stood a few feet behind him. She looked exhausted, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. I reached down and adjusted the control panel on my wheelchair. Arthur's eyes followed the movement. "You were supposed to protect this family," he said quietly. I looked at him. "Family doesn't steal prosthetic legs from wounded soldiers." He flinched slightly. "And family doesn't lock someone in a room because they refuse to sign away their disability compensation." Arthur's hands clenched. "But we are still your family," he said. I paused for a moment. Then I said the one thing that had been clear to me all night. No, the word hung in the air between us. "I'm not part of this anymore." Arthur looked like he had been slapped. I glanced toward the staircase inside the house. The broken wheelchair still lay at the bottom. Bent metal, one twisted wheel, the first domino of the entire night. I looked back at him. "You want to know when this family ended?" Arthur didn't answer. It ended the moment that chair went down the stairs. The wind moved across the driveway again. A corpsman opened the rear door of one of the armored vehicles behind me. The metal ramp lowered with a quiet mechanical sound. Ready for transport. I turned the wheelchair slightly toward it. Then I looked back at my father one last time. "I didn't destroy this family, Arthur." My voice stayed calm. "I just cleaned up the mess you were hiding under the rug." I nodded toward the front hallway, the wheelchair at the bottom of the stairs. He followed my gaze. "That's my goodbye gift." I rolled forward. The wheelchair moved smoothly up the ramp into the vehicle. The interior lights switched on automatically. One of the corpsmen secured the chair. Then he closed the door. Outside the driveway, lights faded as the heavy door sealed shut. The engine started, and the house behind me slowly disappeared from view. Before we end this story, I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing, or would you have given your family another chance? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about justice, resilience, and people who refuse to be treated like they don't matter, make sure you subscribe and stay with us for the next one. The house disappeared in the side mirror long before the SUV reached the highway. No one inside the vehicle said much. The corpsman sitting across from me kept his eyes on the tablet in his lap, while the driver followed the escort vehicle ahead of us. Red lights from the convoy reflected across the windshield every few seconds. Then the lights turned off. Just like that, the operation was over. The road ahead was quiet again. I leaned my head slightly against the window and watched the dark trees pass by outside. It felt strange how calm everything suddenly was. 3 hours earlier, I had been sitting in the corner of a living room pretending not to hear my sister mock me in front of strangers. Now my brother-in-law was sitting in federal custody. My sister was facing conspiracy charges. And the house I grew up in had become a crime scene. Life changes quickly when truth finally shows up. For a long time, I believed something that a lot of people believe. I thought blood meant loyalty. I thought family meant protection. I thought if people shared your last name, they would eventually choose you over everything else. That belief lasted a long time, right up until the moment my sister threw my wheelchair down a flight of stairs. People like to imagine betrayal as something dramatic, a shouting match, a slammed door, but most betrayals are quieter than that. They happen in small moments. A father pretending not to see something cruel. A mother looking away instead of speaking up. A sister smiling while she humiliates you in front of strangers. One moment doesn't destroy a family, but it can expose what was already broken. When Jillian pushed that wheelchair down the stairs, something in my mind finally settled. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was clarity, because that moment confirmed something I had spent years refusing to admit. Some people don't want a relationship with you. They want control over you, and they call that family. My father believed obedience was the same thing as loyalty. If you followed orders, you were a good daughter. If you refused, you were selfish. The problem with that logic is simple. Loyalty is supposed to go both ways. Family is supposed to protect the weakest person in the room, not exploit them, not silence them, and definitely not steal from them. But the truth is, some families operate like companies. Everyone has a role. One person is the star. One person is the provider. One person is the quiet problem that gets hidden away when guests arrive. That was my role. The daughter who didn't quite fit the image anymore. The one who reminded people that things don't always go according to plan. So the system adapted. Ignore her, dismiss her, keep her out of sight. And when that stopped working, try to take her money. People always reveal who they really are when they think you have no power. That night, my sister thought she had absolute power. She thought pushing a wheelchair down a staircase would prove it. But power isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who controls the truth. And truth doesn't care about family dinners. It doesn't care about reputation. It doesn't care about who raised you. It only cares about what actually happened. Derek stole money from wounded sailors. Jillian helped him hide it. And my father tried to force me to sign away my own compensation so they could cover their tracks. Those facts existed whether I exposed them or not. All I did was stop pretending they weren't there. That's the part people struggle with. When someone finally draws a boundary, the people who benefited from the old system call it betrayal. They say things like, "You're tearing the family apart. You're being selfish. You should forgive." But forgiveness doesn't mean accepting abuse. And loyalty doesn't mean protecting wrongdoing. Sometimes loyalty means protecting the people who can't defend themselves. The sailors whose rehabilitation money disappeared. The ones learning how to walk again on prosthetic legs. The ones waiting months for equipment that never arrived. Those people were my family too. They wore the same uniform I did. They paid the same price I did. And none of them deserved to have their recovery stolen to fund someone else's luxury vacations. When I pressed that emergency signal on my watch, I wasn't choosing revenge. I was choosing responsibility. Because the moment you see corruption and stay silent, you become part of it. And silence is the easiest thing in the world. You can justify it 100 different ways. You can say it's not your business. You can say it's complicated. You can say you don't want to hurt people you care about. But every time someone stays silent, the wrong person benefits, and the right person pays the price. That's the lesson I learned the hard way. Family is not defined by blood. It's defined by behavior. The people who stand beside you when you're weak. The people who refuse to profit from your pain. The people who protect your dignity even when nobody else is watching. Those are your real family. Everyone else is just a relative. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where protecting your peace means upsetting people who share your last name, remember something. Boundaries are not betrayal. They are self-respect. And the moment you start protecting your peace, some people will call you selfish. Not because you did something wrong, but because they were benefiting from your silence. Now I'm curious about something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace in your family and protecting yourself? What happened when you made that choice? Tell me in the comments. The first morning back at the base felt strangely normal. The parking lot looked the same gray concrete buildings, the same line of trucks parked along the fence. A few sailors walking toward the administration building with coffee cups in their hands. Life has a strange way of continuing even after a night that feels like it should change everything. I rolled through the front entrance and nodded to the officer at the security desk. He nodded back. No questions, no drama. Inside the building, people were already working. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, someone arguing quietly about paperwork down the hall. If you watch long enough, you'd realize something important about justice. It's rarely loud. Most of the time it looks like paperwork. A few days had passed since the arrests. Derek was in federal custody, waiting for formal charges. Jillian had a lawyer now. My father had made several phone calls trying to stop something that couldn't be stopped. Investigations don't work that way. Once the truth starts moving, it doesn't slow down just because someone important is uncomfortable. But here's the strange part. None of that was the hardest moment for me. Not the arrest, not the confrontation, not even watching my family get taken away in handcuffs. The hardest moment came much earlier. It happened in a quiet hallway, right before everything collapsed. It was the moment I said one simple word. No, that's the part people underestimate. Standing up to corruption isn't usually dramatic. It doesn't start with sirens, it starts with a quiet refusal. No, I won't sign that document. No, I won't pretend this is normal. No, I won't stay silent so someone else can keep getting away with it. People imagine strength as something loud. They think strength means shouting, fighting, or proving you're tougher than the person across from you. But real strength is usually quieter than that. Real strength is restraint. I could have pushed Jillian away on that staircase. I could have started screaming. I could have turned that moment into a physical fight. But that wouldn't have solved anything. It would have just turned the story into chaos. Instead, I pressed one button on my watch, and I let the system do what it was designed to do. Justice works best when emotion stays out of the way. That's something the military teaches you early. Control the situation. Don't let the situation control you. The truth is, most people don't do the right thing because they're afraid of what happens afterward. They're afraid of losing relationships, afraid of conflict, afraid of becoming the person who caused the problem. But here's the uncomfortable reality. The problem already exists. Silence just hides it. For years, Derek had been moving money out of a fund meant for wounded sailors. That didn't start the night I reported it. It had been happening long before that. Every month, someone somewhere was waiting for equipment they needed to recover. Every month, that money disappeared into offshore accounts instead. And the reason it kept happening was simple. Nobody spoke up. Corruption survives because people convince themselves it's easier not to get involved. They say things like, "It's not my responsibility. Someone else will deal with it. I don't want to cause trouble." But every time someone says that, the wrong person benefits. The truth is, doing the right thing often costs something. In my case, it cost me a family, a house I grew up in, a version of life that looked normal from the outside. But here's the part people don't always talk about. I didn't lose everything. What I lost were people who only valued me when I stayed quiet. What I kept were the values that made me who I am. Integrity, responsibility, respect for the people who trusted the system to protect them. Those things matter more than comfort. Because comfort is temporary, but character stays with you. And that's the real lesson I want people to understand. Strength isn't about revenge. Strength isn't about humiliating the people who hurt you. Strength is about refusing to become like them. When I watched Derek kneeling in that driveway, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something much simpler. Relief. Relief that the truth was finally out in the open. Relief that the sailors who needed that money might finally get what they were promised. Relief that I didn't become the kind of person who looks away just to keep things easy. Because easy decisions rarely lead to the right outcomes. The right decisions usually feel uncomfortable at first. They create tension, they upset people, they force you to stand alone for a while. But over time, those decisions build something far stronger than comfort. They build self-respect, and self-respect is the one thing nobody can take from you. So if you ever find yourself in a moment where you have to choose between being liked and doing the right thing, remember something. Being liked can disappear overnight. Doing the right thing stays with you for the rest of your life. Now I want to hear from you. If you had been standing at the top of that staircase that night, would you have stayed silent to protect your family? Or would you have pressed the button and let the truth come out? Tell me what you would have done in the comments. And if stories like this remind you that quiet strength can change everything, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.